Alastair Lukies, founder and CEO of Pollinate, and Dr. Mike Lynch, technology entrepreneur and founder of Invoke Capital, discuss how the UK can bring about a supercharged, sustainable tech sector.
Well, it's despite the strange times, and the constant zoom in, it's as you've always known with me, a land of opportunity, and out of the opaqueness and the inertia that people are feeling, we're seeing such an acceleration, I suppose, of the transformation of the way we work and the way we live and all the rest of it. And as I think about the sort of fusion industries, so people have finally realised that technology is not an industry, it's all pervasive, it's horizontal, it's in everything we do and always will be. And they think of the verticals coming down and, the incumbents fusing into, say, financial services to fintech or medical to medtech. How do we as a nation, with everything going on, COVID, of course, and Brexit, what's going to be our role in that fourth industrial revolution, the fusion industries?
I think the first thing is just people realising that we have to have a role. The fact that there's very little in the way of really advanced tech on the FTSE 100 is actually a national issue, and especially seems to be a bit of a missed opportunity given how good our, for example, science base is and our financial services operations in the UK. We ought to be able to really capitalise on that. But, I think the point about it being a very special time, suddenly the world's being changed and everything's up for grabs. And so now is the opportunity to really grab that and realise that tomorrow is going to be different to yesterday. We haven't got that inertia. A lot of the business models and approaches that were dying slowly are dying fast now. So no, it's a great time of opportunity. And first thing is to realise that and realise it's time to act. And then the question is, what are the ways of doing things? And I think we have all of the fundamental things right. We've got great bright people, got great science base. So the question is, how do we get some of these really big tech businesses in the UK? And there's all sorts of different things, but some of that's regulation. For example, in your area, fintech, being able to actually take a more forward-looking approach to regulation, being a bit more nimble and flexible, allows new models. Same in pharma. We're in a world in medical technology now where it's about the individual, and all of that regulatory framework that's grown up over the years about cohorts and things like that. So flipping that over, or in my world of sort of AI and things like that, understanding the constraints around things like insurance and liability, so that you can actually foster AI. So I think there are lots of things that can be done, and it's really a question of realising that tomorrow is not going to be the same as yesterday.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I want to pick up on this theme you just raised, which really resonates with me. This sense of a purge before and then out of the ashes, comes new opportunity. And of course, all the previous industrial revolutions have shown that. in fintech, I remember, and you've always been such a great supporter of ours, and a great champion for technology. In 2008, people forget, when the global financial crisis happened, you couldn't score any points for being positive about banks. Like, there was no politician that was ever going to stand up and say, look at our great banking sector, even though it was 19% of GDP and 37% of Europe's financial services industry in the UK. You had this huge challenge that people were just, I don't want to know, don't mention it, right? Just keep quiet because it busts society, right? And so we had to change the narrative. And that's really where fintech was born. And you're right to pick up on the regulation, because it's not just tech. That's why I talk about fusion. It's fin and tech, because if it didn't have the fin, if it didn't have financial services, it's just tech. And as I look at Silicon Valley, and I think of their approach to kind of software will eat the world and disruption, and we're gonna destroy that industry, I think that misses a trick. Because I think in your analogy of nature, and we've seen this in COVID, the stories coming from the ocean, these new voices of the ocean replenishing themselves and the songbirds singing again, I think there is this opportunity to blend right touch regulation, incumbency, as you say, great education. But I want to ask you, we do that to a level. We do bring together, education, tech, a bit of investment, and the incumbents in corporate venturing. But we just hit a glass ceiling, don't we, in terms of size? You've said it. Our FTSE 100 has barely any tech companies in it. Why does that happen? Is it, people say it's the domestic market? I'm not sure I buy into that. Why do you think we can't break through that glass ceiling?
I think it's actually capital markets. So, what happens is that we now have amazing startups. They become great mid-sized companies, and then typically they're sold. So, you look at Deep Minds at 400 million, obviously now the backbone of Google AI. You look at Celexa, which became the key technology for Illumina and gene sequencing and all that sort of stuff. So the question is, why are people selling? And you get this idea that it's all the VC's fault because, they're too short term. But actually, they're actually quite rational people usually. And what it comes down to is that they get to that size and they can either sell and bank the return, or because there's no real capital market that's working for tech in the UK, they have to go all the way big enough to become NASDAQ. And that's a hell of a long stretch and a lot of risk. And so they make what is probably a rational decision to sell. So what we've got to do is get the UK market, financial market ready so that these companies feel comfortable listing there, and they take that 400 million and they become 4 billion, and then they become 40 billion, and they employ lots of people, and they pay lots of taxes, and they train lots of people, and we get that ecosystem going. And the great thing about it is a relatively small number of successes, and then all the fund managers will have to become experts at tech, and people get more comfortable with it, and we get back to where we should be, which is having 5 or 6 of these companies in the FTSE 100, and then because you have that pulls stuff through the whole system. So the angel investor is happy to invest because he knows that there's going to be another round, and the mid-level guy is happy to invest because he knows he can float it, and then the public company investor is happy to invest because the company will carry on growing. So, we've done a great job in fixing where we were when you and I started, where it was getting a startup done was almost impossible in the UK. And we've got these great mid-sized companies. We've just got to fix the last part now. And the interesting thing about that is that when these companies are successful in the last part, that's when the country really gets the payback, because that's when you start to get the jobs really at scale, and you get large tax receipts coming back, which will be very helpful in dealing with the fact that a lot of the technology for these things came out of research that was paid for by the taxpayer. So we've got to fix that last bit now.
Yeah. So let's focus on that for a second, because I absolutely share your passion, and of course, we've both done the hard yards, as you say, in building, even calling yourself an entrepreneur 20 years ago meant you got thrown out of the dinner party. So as we think about next year and a post-Brexit world, whatever form that takes, Britain is still a very purchasable brand. We know that. You and I have been on trade missions with prime ministers. We've been around the world. We're still the 6th, 7th strongest economy in the world. Those assets that you describe, for UK PLC, I think about faster payments, right? So you think about the fact we have the most integrated real-time payment system in the world. That got, the government agreed to let MasterCard buy that. I think that was actually a good decision, because MasterCard then internationalized that assets and made commitments to keep, the upside here in the UK. And so Thailand was the first country to buy faster payments, and now double the transactions of faster payments are going through their system compared to the UK. So that's a great UK PLC success story. All of the amazing work you've done in and around Cambridge and in AI and in, is there something that is nationally sellable that can run in parallel to this idea of, finding the unicorn, scaling up these businesses? Is there something in UK PLC IP we can sell, or is it really down to the companies to show the way?
No, I think, this is one of the important things. UK has its incredible technology base, with fundamental technology base, second to none, just as good as the US or China or anything like that. And what we haven't done in the past is really exploited that and got that into commercial impact. And so we have the difficult bit. We have this incredible asset, But what we've got to do is make sure that the payback from that is delivered into the UK. So it's all very well creating world-leading AI, and it gets to 400 million, and it's bought by someone else, and all the money's made elsewhere. And more importantly, the control of that. So I do think with whatever you think about Brexit, there's an incredible opportunity here. So there's been lots of talk about the advantages and disadvantages of it, but the real benefit comes now in grabbing the opportunity. And the opportunity is we can break free from things like European regulation, and we can be far more forward-looking, far more nimble, and readjust to this new world that's coming. So, for example, the biggest issue with autonomous vehicles is the insurance market. Well, the reason we have airliners flying over us is because of something called the Warsaw Convention, which made that work. We can do things like change the legal framework, so the precedent is right for these sort of things. And then in fintech, obviously, a long list of things. And I'd almost disagree with you with one word, which is it's not about light touch regulation. I would say it's about enlightened regulation. So, you don't have to give up the protections that regulators are there to do. But what you're doing is just realizing that the benefit to the public is actually different. So, for example, if you've got a new amazing cancer drug that might only work on 500 patients a year, but is one of these things that knocks out the particular gene that's causing the problem in the mutation, then testing that on a much smaller cohort, you're not risking anything in doing that.
Yeah.
You have to be brave and say, look, we've gone from a situation where we used to test drugs on vast trials.
Yeah.
Now the technology's moved on. So I think we've got to be very brave and say, right, we are going to move faster. We are going to be cleverer about regulation. And so it's about enlightened regulation in fintech, in pharma, in AI, and the hinterland of stuff around it. And if we do that, put that with our science base, put that with our impact in things like financial services, and create a regulatory framework. And there is a brand out there. The UK is the place to come to do this kind of technology for the next era, because that's what we think about, and we put everything in place that you need to do that, and you need to do it here. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and I was stuttering over my coffee. We refer to it as right touch regulation rather than light touch, and you're exactly right. It's somewhere between what we had to do. So good example in fintech, for 250 years there hadn't been a new clearing bank in the UK. So we had 4 clearing banks in the UK. Their headquarters were the 4 buildings round the Bank of England just down the road from where I am now, and they had owned that monopoly. So all innovation was stunted because only 4 banks could do the innovation. And a bit like when you go on to Virgin Airlines and British Airways at the same time, ironically the prices are the same for a flight to the US, right? So competition wasn't working. And after the global financial crisis, we've issued 23 new banking licenses in the UK in the last 10 years, and you've seen neobanks. We've seen banks growing at light speed. That's then pulled the incumbents on, so they've had to innovate to keep up. So that competition, that right touch regulation. We also have the sandbox, the FCA sandbox, a project called Project Innovate, which welcomes, so to your brilliant analogy in that healthcare example, the cancer example, what they said was, if you've got a fintech idea, you want to get into insurance or a payday lending or money transfer, come to us as a regulator and have a conversation with us, come into the sandbox and test it, and we'll tell you whether you're going to comply or not. So that compressed and saved dozens of organisations picking something and then finding out that they didn't comply with the regulation. And so you're right. If we have this twin strategy of right touch regulation in each of these fusion industries, and then the capital markets getting excited because we get iconic companies being born and growing, Vocalink I come back to, we didn't celebrate that. Vocalink was bought for over $1 billion by MasterCard. It's now being used all around the world as a payment system. But I want to come back to that supply chain of finance that you talked about, because I know you've been a very generous investor in tech and advise a lot of people, and in my own small way I try and do the same. We raised a big fund, so I've experience, you know, dealing with the LPs. We're very good, as you say, at startup. We're now getting better at getting to mid-size. And then it's this scale-up issue that's the challenge. And you've talked about the fact that's because people may sell out. But that supply chain above the capital markets, the pension funds, you know, we don't have a sovereign wealth funds that invests internally. You know, we follow the guidelines of state aid to the letter, while other countries across Europe are helping. You know, Germany have had 56% of the notifications to Brussels about the fact they've issued state aid to their Mittelstand during COVID. Is it fair to say that it's got to be right up at that level, that the pension funds have got to be incentivized to grow these businesses?
Well, I don't even think you need to incentivise. We just need to, again, funnily enough, we're back at regulation. So at the moment, if you're an insurance company or a pension fund, there are very tight regulations on what you can do. And remember, although our younger colleagues who are starting startups always want more money, the reality is there is a lot of money out there, but the problem is that your insurance company can't invest in these kind of companies. So, you know, a very small freeing up and to say, right, well, you know, if we allow another 1% of those assets to go into tech-type portfolios, which these days are not anything like as risky if they're constructed, then with a lot of money available, the City of London has a vast amount of money. And so, again, it's actually the right touch idea that you're talking about, which is, you know, realise that these days, actually, you know, the biggest risk you can have as a pension fund at the moment, if you're in the market at the moment, is not to have invested in Facebook and Apple and Google, because nearly all of your return, if you were in on the US market, would have come from that. So, you know, it is a question of there is a large amount of money there. If you can realise what you've got to fund as a country going forward, you can be a little clever about how that's done and free up some of that money. And the one thing I would just point out is, you know, it's very easy for people to suggest that the government should put the money up. And you have things like the British Business Bank. And whilst I think there are good arguments for pump priming once in a while, and there's some special cases we can talk about, the reality is that the amount of money government can do here, A, isn't necessary, and B, is too small. You know, by the time you're looking at, we do Dark Trace. Dark Trace is going to list probably beginning of next year. It will be a FTSE 100. But if it's doing a round at the moment, it's 60, 70 million. And, you know, the problem is if you've got a British Business Bank set up with 300 million, then you're talking about 3 deals.
Yeah.
Whereas insurance company assets at the moment in $1 trillion. So it's, you know, you have to be a bit more sophisticated than just looking at doing. Now, there are cases where a little bit of money does make a very big difference. And it's those special places where the market can't be left to it. And, you know, this is the other interesting thing is that, again, it's about this right touch sophistication idea. If you look at most tech deals, it's great that there's a free market. And at the end of the day, if someone comes along and they want to buy the company, that's great. But occasionally there are things that are so important they're sovereign. And that's a word we've heard a lot about over the last few years. And the Americans, they have this CFIUS model for that, where they'll look at something. So, you know, this ARM debate's really interesting because, you know, ARM is in everything. So whoever controls ARM is an incredibly strong strategic position. Moreover, you put ARM and NVIDIA together and you probably control hardware for everything. Now, in the UK, we have ARM at the moment. We also have something called GraphCore, which is the NVIDIA thing. Put those two together, and as a UK asset, that's strategic. Now, our natural reaction in the UK in the past has been very black and white about it, a bit like your banking licenses. And, you know, we say, no, we mustn't touch any of this stuff. But then you look across the Atlantic, and the Americans have a whole mechanism to make sure that an asset like that can't be used against America. You know, we have to be cleverer here. You know, the next century isn't going to be about gunboats. It's going to be about the fact you can turn off the communication system, or you can stop someone getting access to the chips. And this is all part, really, of understanding how important this technology ecosystem is to the country. It's economically important, but it's also strategically and politically important. And so that's why it all comes back to this opportunity we have to think differently, think in a much more nimble way. If we want to use state aid, we can do it now.
Yeah.
And as long as we're using it occasionally in the right places,
yeah,
it's an incredible asset for us post-Brexit.
Yeah, and we don't. I think it's a brilliant point, Mike. We don't have to win in everything. We're never going to be as good at India as offshoring. We're never, Israel's amazing at security. But I just want to sort of put you on the spot a bit. I'm so passionate about this idea of fusion, of right touch regulation, take the incumbency, blend it into technology, change the engine in mid-flight, evolve the industry. And we are doing that in fintech, and there's a big review being done by Ron Khalifa at the moment, called the Khalifa Review on fintech, and trying to use that as a cut and paste example into other industries. If we've got a Trivial Pursuit counter, I love Trivial Pursuit, right? So there's 6 bits of cheese. So you've mentioned pharma tech, there's agri-tech, there's infrastructure tech, there's creative, and our creative industry is incredible in the UK. What would you say would be the good bets for us as if we could be globally playing seriously at the top table in 6 industries, what do you think are the ones that we can win in?
Well, it's what we're really good at. So, we're second to none in AI research, and we've actually produced probably the key technology companies in that area, which are now part of other companies. So you've got AI. Pharma, again, amazing pharma industry in the UK, perhaps not as entrepreneurial because of regulation. Yeah. So I think we could let, a lot more smaller plants grow on that one. Fintech, we're coming from a situation where we're world leaders in financial services, and we both have to defend that by understanding it has to change, and we have to take the opportunity of that. So I think those are the very obvious key ones. We're just talking about chip design with ARM, absolutely up there. So what an embarrassment of riches, and we could carry on. We've got other things coming along. So, for example, some of the quantum stuff that's there. The problem is not the tech. The problem is not the assets that we have. The thing we have to do is really understand that it is an incredible opportunity to take that and be at the top table. And if we miss that opportunity, we will be relegated to being irrelevant. And we have those assets. We just need to get them up to that level where they're sitting in the UK and they're $40, $50 billion businesses. Yeah. And they're creating that ecosystem, which will really make us a powerhouse for the next century. It's an amazing time. It's a bit like, a digital version of watching, Brunel see a steam engine go past him. That's the moment of opportunity we're in now.
No, that's awesomely exciting and inspiring. And so we're going to finish up, but be an open nation, right? So this is what I mean. Be open to trade. We can be more nimble. We can be open. We're not tied. Create right touch regulation, so the right balance. So still protect people, but help things evolve. And if the incumbents aren't evolving themselves, then use a bit of stick as well as a bit of carrot to get them to evolve. And then by doing that, you open up new aqueducts of capital that can then flow into these businesses. And I suppose what I'm hearing from you, which I completely support, is let's be bold in this 4th industrial revolution, and let's just get 2 or 3 home runs, and then others will follow.
Yeah, now is the time to be bold. And we only have to prime the pump once, and it will run by itself.
Awesome. Mike, it's so good to see you. Thanks for all you do in the industry, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Stay well.
You as well, Al.